Are you going to reshow? Are we live or is this not live?
It's going live right now.
Oh.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to this week's episode of Reviewing Things, and we finally have my partner here, Kfidds.
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
What's up, Kfidds?
What's up, man? Good to be on.
Yeah, so Fidds is just a live show, so anything that happens, we mess up, whatever, it's just gonna be live. We're not gonna do an audio version of this.
Oh, gotcha. Cool.
So just shoot from the cuff.
So I can't take anything back. Son of a bitch.
Yeah. So this week we're gonna go into season 3. I know I went over season 1 and 2 and kind of like a condensed version of it, and this season 3 is gonna be the same way. So, like I said before, Fidds, like, tell me why you like Stranger Things.
The first time I saw Stranger Things, I was alone. I was actually sitting at a friend's house, and they were I can't remember what they were doing. They were out in the backyard doing something. They're like, hey, just watch TV, whatever. I'll be back in like a half hour. They're fixing something out in the backyard, and I'm like, oh, look, here's Stranger. This looks kind of cool. It has the graphics on the icon. This is the day it came out. I mean, it's just so it was on day it came out on Netflix. It's probably I'd say push it about like around noon, 1 o'clock. We were gonna probably get some lunch here after he was done doing whatever he was doing. And I'm like, I'm gonna pop this thing on. As soon as I saw the opening credits, I was already hooked. But the immediacy of the capturing of the nostalgia. I mean, we're kids of the '80s. It is another thing that resonated. The newer It resonated with me too. Around the same time, I was in 1989. I was a 12-year-old kid, so a lot of this was very familiar to me. I was, a product of the '80s. We call ourselves the Oregon Trail generation. It's kind of a subgen between Gen X and millennials. And this is us. We came of age during the analog, era and during the transition to the digital era, which nobody else really got to experience except like for a small subset where we learned how to use a computer on bit DOS and shit. And so all this stuff kind of started popping up and you see all the references. And I mean, I think the Thing poster in the background I was in Mike's room immediately like grabbed me. And I'm like, this is really kicking it. And it really grabbed onto the nostalgia. And that's what I think was the purpose of the first pilot of that pilot was to grab you and say, all you 80s fans, especially you children of the 80s, because again, our age group thrives on this show. It drew us right in and said, this show's going to be that. And that afternoon, I went and grabbed my buddy. I hit pause and said, get done with your shit. We're gonna go grab or order pizza. We're gonna go grab food. We ended up ordering, I think, wings and stuff. And we sat and we watched the entire season straight through the entire afternoon. We didn't stop. We couldn't stop. It was almost like it was like a Pringle. Every episode, you're like, no, one more. And the next thing you know, the sun's down, and, it's 8:00 at night and we're like, holy crap. What did we just watch? That is insanely good. So I drew you right from the beginning. It draws you in. So it's the nostalgia, but it's also well written. It's got that Stephen King kind of tinge to it. It's got, it has references to all the great horror films, like John Carpenter or Wes Craven. It pulls in so many different ingredients in what made our childhood, so what we consider to be so special, riding our little bikes around and going to the mall and playing an arcade and doing all the things that we did at that age. So it really did capture the old people, but it still captured the youth as well for the young people of today that are intrigued by these types of storytelling and a fantastic ensemble cast that allowed younger people to join the party as well. So it was a really cool kind of generational bond connection that kind of all came across, because people of all ages love the show. So it's kind of universal in that sense.
Jesus Christ. I was
Oh,
talking the whole time. I had my mic unmuted. My bad. The thing
that reminded me of Wayne's World when he's like, you know what you can do with your show, and then the plane goes over and you can't understand the word that Garth is saying, and I'm like, I hope he's not saying something so profound that he just changed, would have changed my life.
Yeah.
I just missed it because it was on mute.
Yeah, it's fact. I was on mute. So anyway, as I was saying in my rant, basically what drew me into it was the nostalgia back to the horror movies of the 80s. And like I grew up on those movies. Me and my brother were like huge fans. My brother's a huge Stephen King fan, and there's a lot of like references in this show to it. I think like the part where they're looking for Will in the forest, like in the woods, and then the fog is out there, reminded me a lot of Silver Bullet when they're going for the party hut is going through the woods to look for the werewolf. There's references to it in here. There's just a storm drain, the yellow coat, like Mike's in the yellow coat here. Just little references to those back there to like show homage to King. But even like
I left Spielberg out too, by the way. There's so I felt like the pilot actually was shot as a kind of like Super 8 was with J.J. Abrams, shot with that same, like, we're going to make it look as much like a Spielberg 80s film as possible as well.
Well, not just that, just throwbacks to E.T. is in the show too. And then you want to go into like what really pulled me in. It was after watching the streaming of the credits, not the cast names, which is cool, but the actual naming of the episode when it actually draws you in. It's like a throwback to Friday the 13th or Halloween, where you actually see the scene open from one of the letters, which I actually think is actually pretty cool. And they actually do that throughout all the seasons. So
a lot of Tron in that opening graphic too.
Yes. It's totally nostalgia, like, and I love the fact of it. And then you like think about like the 80s were a fun time, man. I mean, I'm a 90s kid. I was born in 85, so like I had some of the 80s, but like the 80s had so much good like pop culture references and everything. And this show like does a really good job of showing that from costume design to sets to like just like nostalgia things. Like they had Dig Dug in the last episode. What was it? The game with that Lucas and Dustin are playing where they try to rescue the princess. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Dragon's Lair.
Dragon's Lair. Yes, Dragon's Lair. Yes, that was like huge.
Dude, you know how much money I spent at Chuck E. Cheese because that was a 50-cent arcade game, not a quarter. So you had to drop 2 tokens in, and yeah, it was a laser disc. It was a laser. They had that one. They had a Dragon's Lair 2, and then they had another one called Space Ace. All 3 of those, same exact. But when they played that, yeah, that was actually, I loved the show when I was a kid. Silver Spoons was one of my favorite shows because Ricky Schroeder had Dragon's Lair in his house, in his living room, outside of the little train track, and his little arcade down in the living room.
Ricky Schroeder.
Man, I should have played more of that game.
Yeah, that's fun. The game's fun. But they actually mentioned that too in this season. Like this game, was it like quarter eating shit game? Is what he says or something like that. Because it costs more than regular games, but it was just basically a story you had to follow, and if you basically memorize it, you beat it, which I thought was pretty funny. But with that, let's get into our newbies. So we like to go over the new characters in the seasons. So in this one, we actually get introduced to 6 ones I think that are a little bit more profane than the other ones, or more dominant. We go start with Robin, who works at Scoops Ahoy. She becomes actually a main cast member. She's actually played by Ethan Hawke's daughter. Great character. She actually reveals something about herself later in the series, in this season, that actually gives more character development to her in terms of her and Steve's relationship. And then we have the mayor, who's a complete asshole.
Played by an 80s, early 90s icon, Carrie Elwes, who was in Princess Bride. And he was also in, he also, later, he was in, what's it called? The horror films where he's got a chop saw. But he was in, he was in Hot Shots Hot Shots, and like he was a known person. So that having him play the kind of the rotten character, it pulls in so many. I mean, last season they brought in Paul Reiser, right? I mean, you're bringing in Matthew Modine. You're bringing in some of these iconic actors that were really young during that time period, and Carrie Elwes is one of them. So yeah, that's the mayor.
Yeah, and that's another thing too that's like great is like the throwback to Aliens. Elle's look is total Ripley. Shaved head, strong, dominant female.
Yep.
And you bring in Paul Reiser, so like of course the geek in me like geeked out because he's an alien. He's a villain in Aliens. If you haven't seen it, I'm sorry, it's like 30 years old. But he's one of the villains that tries to bring the alien back. It's just nice little callback there. And like Carrie Ellis too, getting him in there is, Princess Bride was a big movie in the 80s, and Robin Hood, Men Wear Tights. another one he was in.
Yeah, great one.
I mean, like he was like pretty prominent in the 80s, late 80s, 90s.
Mhm.
And then we bring in Bruce, who's played by Gary Busey's son Jake, and he's a complete asshole in this, working at the Hawkins Post. And my goodness, you could tell he's totally Gary Busey's kid. Yeah, total jerk off. And then we go to Heather, who's actually the daughter of the owner of the Hawkins Post, who plays a prominent role. And we get more developments of the character of Erica, who's Lucas's sister, who we saw her in the earlier seasons more of like as like Braddy's sister, but now they have a big like nice little character arc where she actually gets involved in the shenanigans of everyone. And how could we forget everyone's favorite Russian, Alexei?
Played by Jordan Miller, actually. Oh wait, no. You can't unsee it now, can you?
Yes, I can. It's oh my god. But I thought it was the new additions to the cast were actually a nice step up. Like I said last time when I did show, I think season 2 was probably the weakest of the Stranger Things seasons. And I think season 3 with a new cast and like the storyline is a lot better, and like it picks off where season 1 left off. There's a lot more entertaining and a lot more development of characters in here. Like I think season 2 was just too many like Stranger Things has a lot of storylines within a story that all connect at the end. I think season 2 kind of like thinned it out too much. The Elle storyline there, where she went to go see her mom with the scene number 2 or number 8, was just totally like it was just out there. It kind of like watered down everything to me personally. This one kind of tied everything up nicely at the end. But yeah, I really like these people. Who was your favorite one from this season? Your favorite new character?
Alexei. I mean, honestly, I actually make the jokes about him looking like Jordan Miller, but the dude is hysterical to me. He is the there was so much like Ruskies. I mean, this whole season was it very much captured the Russian Red Scare. You know, it really kind of started pushing that. It just had that feel of the Russians are coming for us, the Soviets are coming for us. And Alexei being, if you've ever seen the movie Ruskies, where the kids protect the Russian spy guy or whatever. And here is, Alexei, basically, it's like a reverse Ruskies. He's, instead of being with the kids, which he probably would have had a lot more time because he's the kid, he wants his Slurpee and he wants to play around. And he's with Hopper and Joyce instead. And what's his name? The Max. Murray. He's with Murray, and it's a whole different experience for him. But he cracked me up. He's that guy, that character, and even when they're at the carnival, I got a full on inner space vibe at the mall. I don't know if you remember if you've seen Inner Space, but there's a scene at the mall where someone's chasing an assassin's chasing the person that they're trying to protect in the mall, and he has a silencer too, or not in the mall, in the movie it's in the mall. In this one it's at the carnival, but it was a very similar thing to me too. So like Alexei, he cracked me up. He was kind of like an outsider in this, and I'd say obviously the addition of Robin was great for the show. She's fantastic. So I guess she's a regular cast member though, so I can kind of rave about her on multiple seasons at this point, but she's great too. But Alexei just cracked me up because he was a small bit part, and the actor that played him probably the peak of his acting career, and he played the part down to the picture you had is great because that's basically he tries to play hardball, and then he realizes that he needs them as much as they need him to survive. And so that uncanny American Russian relationship in the 80s to bridge the gap between us and our Soviet rivals was, something that we would see like in Rocky or in something in, a lot of the films that, the Flight of the Navigator or whatever. It all kind of had that same feel. So I think Alexei would go there, but Robin too, just because she's a fantastic actress in general and her character's great.
Yeah. We're just going like people just for the season, I would have to say Lexi's probably my favorite one, but Robin is like a strong second because of her dynamic with Steve. Like just that whole and her character like is just hilarious. To me, it's hilarious, especially when they get caught by the Russians and they're doing the truth serum. Like that whole scene is, hilarious to me. Like she's just a dork, and like I really like her character. And I mean, she's a regular now, but like her introduction was pretty funny. But Alexei, yeah, he takes the cake just for the fact he loves Looney Tunes. Cherry Slurpees are his thing, and he talks a lot of shit in Russian. with him and Murray, and him and Murray hit it off, which is kind of funny.
Which gave Murray a counterpart in the series. It balanced out their group. Instead of a threesome, it becomes a foursome. You've got like a pair and a pair, so that becomes part of the adventure. And the thing is with Carrie Elwes, being inserted in the show too, you always have to have a bad mayor, don't you? The Goonies. I mean, you got to have a bad mayor. Gremlins. You got to have a bad mayor. You have to have the person that nobody trusts. That's of course in leadership in the town. And I think Carrie Elwes played that scumbag role real well. And we left out the Russian assassin, the Russian Terminator.
He's he'll be mentioned later, but yeah, we can with him too.
Just like no words. So.
Total. Like I told Jem, and we're watching him. Like this is totally like a knockoff of the Terminator. Like just his movements, his speech, like his lines. Total knockoff. The way he shoots the gun, like it's just totally homage to Terminator.
Oh, absolutely.
But let's get into Billy. So
Billy.
I mentioned this like last episode, like Billy, first of all, Billy's looks like a horrible Vince Neil from it's horrible. And like the dynamic he has with Mrs. Wheeler in season 2, when they have that little, he comes to the house and she's taking a bath and she comes downstairs and they have that like interaction to me it was weird. Like now she's got the hots for an 18-year-old, and they kind of play on that in this season where they use that as all the moms are looking at Billy, the 18-year-old dude that looks horrible, but he becomes like he's one of the main characters of this story. He actually gets taken over by the Mind Flayer. Spoiler, but he takes over by the Mind Flayer, and you see the development of Billy's character, why Billy is the way Billy is. They kind of explain that, like why he's such a jerk towards Max and towards you see the dynamic with even last season we saw how his father is to him, when he smacks him around to go get Max. It's just a lot of I think it's a nice little character arc for him. Even though you despise him, you kind of feel with him a little bit for the way he is.
Yeah, and the thing with Billy, I mean, you want to establish a really good villain, is you establish a villain that people can actually say that they understand why this person broke bad. Walter White is a great example. You see Walter White as a good person that transforms over the course of an entire series into something almost completely evil that still has possible redeeming qualities. The Anakin Skywalker, and with Billy, he becomes a very round character. It's very easy to make a villain in some of these old horror films, just a flat character that has no personal backstory. I mean, even Jason has some sort of backstory that and we do actually learn that if you've seen the original, for the most part, the original Friday the 13th. And with Billy, you start seeing all this thing. And I do love the picture you chose because Billy, and he actually does have his face pressed up against the glass like Jim Carrey's nipples, or like in Midnight Express, or not Midnight. Yeah, Midnight Express. And so is it Midnight Express? Yeah, I think it's Midnight Express.
Yeah, I think it's Midnight Express.
And the way that they develop character, again, one thing though is, why the hell is he always shiny? He's always greased up. There isn't a scene where he's not sweaty unless he's wearing like a jean jacket. But when he's got his shirt off, he's always dripping sweat somehow. And I was kind of joking around, but he doesn't doesn't have like a chiseled body either. He has like a weird, like kind of like a dude that might go to the gym maybe twice a week, but likes his beer kind of body. And so, you sweat him up a little bit though. It's more or less, it's not chiseled. And so it's like that. So it's kind of funny that way, but his character develops that way. And I think that with the ladies in the town, seeing him as being an attractive young boy who's a rebel, and this character, it shows how unsatisfied the women in the town are with their husbands who are too busy paying attention to their careers or not focusing on their wives, which was a theme of the 80s quite frequently, the disenfranchised housewife. And so and they've been playing this thing over the course. I'm waiting for season 5 where like their mom officially just chops the dad's head off, because there are so many scenes where like you're waiting for her to like poison him with like you put a rat poison pill in his coffee or something, because she's just so annoyed with the dad. But Billy creates this character where we see, like, again, the scene with his mom on the beach, and we find out what happened with his mom and why he's a half brother. He's Max's half sister or half brother. And so why is he so broken? And it does help. I think Pete and I talked about that on Tainted Glove on Monday night. Characters, the sympathy that you feel for someone that goes evil, it's more heartbreaking when you feel a connection to a character going, I could have actually made decisions like 3 or 4 decisions in a row that were bad decisions that put me in a position where this is the slippery slope and you get lost in the funhouse. And Billy's character is that kind of kid where you're like, you understand why he's an asshole. Like, he's a broken person. He's a broken thing. And his character develops over time. And you know, you always want a character to redeem themselves. And so it puts Max in a really tough spot because she loves her brother, but she hates her brother, and he treats her like shit, but he doesn't treat her like shit for the same reasons she thinks, you know, and she's broken in a different way. And like, they're in a broken 80s family that people in the 80s tried to shun. And, you know, being a kid of the 80s, divorce was like, if your parents got divorced, I mean, it was common, but you didn't realize how common it was. It was like the end of the world for a lot of my friends when their parents split. And when they had to live in those blended families, it was very difficult at the time because it felt culturally, because we didn't realize how similar everybody was. It felt culturally like it was like I'm a failure just somehow because my parents failed. And so that for Max and Billy, that whole character drawn thing, and of course being in an abusive family, that's going to create abusers unless they can break the cycle. And Billy's just repeating the behavior that he learned through example, and that's what makes his character. I loved his character's arc the entire show. I've actually been a big fan of Billy's character.
Yeah, and I totally agree. But they also I like how they actually sprinkled in that he does have morals in certain aspects. One of the things that sticks out to me, one of the scenes, is when Mrs. Wheeler goes into the locker room and he has that vision of smashing her head against the shelf. And then he wakes up and tells her, "Get away from me," because he knows he's going to do something bad. So doesn't want to hurt her. So he's showing some aspects of good as a character. So I do like those things sprinkled in, and then eventually, you know, at the end, what happens with him. But you know, that whole arc I really liked. As far as his appearance, yeah, he looks really weird. I think he needs to lay off the eyeliner, the eyeliner if he's using it. I know it's an 80s thing for rock style, but yeah, it's just strange, and it was kind of strange how all the moms are into him. But I get what you're saying, and they kind of mentioned how, you know, Mrs. Wheeler settled for their father because he had a good job. He was older. They hint that he's older, and she settled for him because it was a better lifestyle change for him. And she basically, you know, they had the kids and whatnot. So that's that. I think they mentioned that when they're referring to Nancy and Steve when they're in their relationship and how she'll settle for him. I think Jonathan brings it up, like, you'll settle for him like everybody settles for, you know, their husbands. But yeah, Billy definitely a good character arc.
Mm-hmm. And he, you know, if you go do a Google search and you type in 80s horror bully or boyfriend, you're going to come up with a lot of pictures of characters that resemble the style you can see if they were trying to like emulate with Billy as well. Billy does hit a lot of those boxes with the 80s. You know, you could almost picture him wearing a 3/4 t-shirt with no graphics on it, just like one of those blue sleeves. You know, they were talking about those 3/4 white t-shirts. And you could see him, you know, falling asleep in his waterbed and getting sucked, you know, pulled under while he's got his headphones on and his blood spattering onto the ceiling.
Johnny Depp style?
In a scene that was filmed actually upside down.
So with that, Fitz, let's get into like the main villains or the of this season. So we have the Russians, the evil Russians. You know, 80s was all about the Cold War, how America was against the Russians. Well, they're trying to get the gate open in Russia, and they figure, well, it'll open in Hawkins, let's go there. So they're building basically a facility underneath the city to try to get the gate open to explore the Upside Down. And then we have the Mind Flayer. Mm-hmm. And came back, and it's explained that when Will actually had the Mind Flayer burned from his body and 11 closed the gate in season 2, a part of the Mind Flayer was still here and never got back to the Upside Down. So that kind of explains why it's still here. I kind of find it hilarious that this plot is all like kind of found out by Joyce finding that her magnets aren't sticking.
You're typical, right?
Yeah.
My magnet collection. She's always, but she's like always like the investigator. Like in the first season, she figured out how to communicate to the Upside Down. You know, and every season she's got some sort of. She's the one that always is finding. She's the adult Sherlock, I think, or the whatever. She always seems to have a clue. It's so funny. I love it.
And I think like Winona Ryder does an excellent job. Like in the first season, how she plays a disheveled mother. Mm-hmm. You know, any mom would be like that. You know, and people think she's crazy. She even thinks she's crazy half the time. But just I love the way her character development is too. Like now in this season, she's more of she lost Bob last season, so she's more closed off from relationships. She's got baggage with that, on top of, you know, being out of a bad marriage with Will and John's dad.
Mhm. And now
But
with Hopper starting to put on a little full court press of familiarity too, because like he asks her out on a date and she stands him up because she's worried about the
Enzos, yeah.
freaking magnets. She's with the high school science teacher trying to figure out why the magnets aren't working, and poor Hop's just sitting there alone.
Yeah, Mr. Clark, another underrated character. Pretty hilarious, especially when she goes to his house and the garage comes up. You see him in his shorts.
Cookie shorts, beautiful.
But and as far as the Russians, you have your Russian Terminator. So that we're gonna get to him. As you can see, it's totally like a total Arnold knockoff kind of resemblance. And you see that the Mind Flayer actually, instead of being uh more of a spirit as it was in the second season, he's more physical. So he's taking over people within the town of Hawkins, basically making them for some reason eat like pesticides and dirt and whatnot. Basically taking over their bodies. He took over Billy's. And Billy's actually one of the main people that are bringing people to him, and he's possessing them. And they eventually turn into like particles of him and attached to him, which I did find strange that everyone kind of changed into a particle except Billy. He left Billy.
We gotta have your Pied Piper. He's the Pied Piper. He's the guy that could attract all those moms and all these people. You know, he. You have to have the familiar, right? When you have like vampires, you have the familiar. And I love the fact that the Mind Flayer turns itself into basically a meat suit. It starts with rats exploding and then starts building a small version with rats. And then, every time that these people get possessed, they eventually explode and they come together. And now this Mind Flayer takes on a physical form that's based out of exploded flesh. But it also is reminiscent of another really popular 80s, or campy at least 80s remake of a 50s horror film, which it does have resemblance of The Blob. And The Blob, I believe, that came out in the 80s was with Dillon. Was it Kevin Dillon or Matt Dillon? I can't remember.
I think could have been Matt. Let me make sure.
It was Kevin Dillon? I think it was Kevin Dillon. Kevin Dillon was Brian Flagg in The Blob in 1988. Yep. Soon to be, of course, Johnny Drum.
Yes, Kevin Dillon.
So, but it had that kind of like that feel too. These little particles of meat that from these exploded rats or these exploded people start coming together, and then it forms the actual what looks like what would be the physical shape of the Mind Flayer, who in the past looked like a giant hurricane in the Upside Down, or in the when you'd see its form, it looked like a dust devil almost.
But I got a lot of Invasion of the Body Snatchers too from the taking over the bodies, just because like they said. They have their normal, basically the way they act normally, and then the Mind Flayer actually takes them over and then turns a switch, and basically he does what they want them to do, and they are under his power. And I got a lot of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That's one of the movies I saw where the aliens take over the people's bodies basically and
that's a shout out to the 1978 remake of again another 50s earlier popular film, but there was a Donald Sutherland Invasion of the Body Snatchers that came out in 1978. I think that was Jeff Goldblum was in it. Leonard Nimoy, I believe, was in it. And that one was like late 70s, like at the end of the 70s. But that still, I'm sure, had a little bit of an influence on the puppets, the people behind the puppets, because that was my exposure to Body Snatchers. That, and then seeing, of course, the clip in Gremlins when Gizmo was watching TV late at night.
Yeah. But, I do like the way they developed the story of having it actually become flesh. I did like the... Of course, as the seasons progress, you're going to have a lot more money, a lot more budget. So I thought the way you displayed everything in here was a lot better, even though it was CGI, some of it. It was better looking. The Demogorgon in the first season was okay. And I think that's the reason why they kept them in the dark mostly, was because they didn't have the budget to actually show them the way they wanted them to. And then in season 2, they kind of like, if you notice, there's a lot more Demogorgons in there. So they had more budget to show their actual, work they wanted to display to the audience. And there's no different here. The battle with the Mind Flayer is awesome, with the firecrackers and explosions that go around them. It's just this season is beautifully shot in terms of nostalgia, in terms of the the cinematic look of just even like the explosions of the fireworks around them when they're standing around him, and you can see like the characters around him. That shot is pretty cool to me. I really enjoy the villains in this season. The Russian thing is a play on the 80s, man. It's just that was everything in the 80s. Gorbachev and Reagan, that was the big thing. The Cold War. Yeah, a lot of demi-dogs in season 2, Spag. The Cold War was a big thing in the 80s, and still, I mean, now we're in the 2022, and I mean, it's still kind of a thing now. Russia and the U.S. So it's just something that still didn't die, not to that level, but still there. And they're always like the evil empire that everybody worried about. So I thought that was pretty cool adding them in there.
I love, you know, and the fact that because again, it starts the whole series, the season starts out a year before it actually starts playing out. It's like basically right after the events of season 1, the Russians start this, and then we jump to a year later, and everything in the 80s happened at the mall. If you were gonna get it, it was the one-stop shop for everything you wanted. You could go to the mall and get a pair of shoes. You could go to the mall and get a hot dog on a stick and a really delicious lemonade. You could go to an arcade. You can go see a movie. You could do. There's so many different things you could do at a mall. It's one stop. You can go buy sunglasses. I mean, go to the pagodas, whatever. And I love the fact that in this show, in this season, the Russians have basically utilized their corrupt mayor that they've got under their thumb, and they've masked their Spies Like Us-esque elevator and facility in the place where everyone goes, a place where it's not strange to see random stores opening up and closing and whatever. The mall, where everything happens in the 80s, the mall. And so even the Russians know that if you need something, you're going to go to the mall. And so I love that whole part of it. And I love the fact that obviously when they find the elevator and the elevator goes down, all I can think of is Spies Like Us. When Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd are, you know, at you want to go get you want to go get a Pepsi or something like that, and he pulls the lever of the Pepsi and they go down to the underground. All of a sudden now you open a whole new world. And so the Russians have been using the mall as a cover to build this lab underneath Hawkins, where they're continually trying to get this gate back open again. And so they've infiltrated the Red Scare, the Manchurian Candidates. You know, we've got all these people in our society that are actually Russian spies, which was a huge fear in the 80s. People, I mean, I think everybody assumed that someone they knew was a Russian spy, even though nobody was a Russian spy. But, you know, we were terrified at that time period that the Russians were going to, you know, we had to do, drills to hide under our desk in case of a nuclear holocaust. I mean, it's a weird time in that sense, because a lot of stuff was governed by fear, but freedom. It was a weird kind of, that's why I think our release, whenever we felt good, was always so, as it was like almost like a reserved fear. Like anytime that, you know, we could be celebrating and the bomb could drop and we're going to die. Holocaust, hello, until the fall of the Berlin Wall and things started, you know, really kind of going one way. But I mean, that was we were the tail end of multiple generations that woke up every day not knowing if that was the day that we were going to see a mushroom cloud. And so that was a kind of an interesting I love how they did that with the mall, with the Russians, how they've infiltrated our society. They're among us and among our most coveted and cherished place, the shopping mall.
Yeah, and like just to even go play off the shopping mall. I mean, the malls were big growing up in the 80s and 90s, even in the 2000s. Like that was like the place to go for teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the throwbacks to at the time, like 1985, this is set in. So of course they have the Back to the Future in. So I totally popped for that when they saw that in theater. And Steve actually explains that. Steve explains that later in season 4 about how he references it. But like actually at the end of this season, when he looks for a job.
Steve proving that he knows absolutely nothing about movies, which is hilarious because it's the kid from the arcade from season 2 that now is the manager of the video store. Great little segment.
He calls him Alex Keaton. Alex Keaton goes back in time. But just like little things like that were pretty cool. And I do love the set of the mall. Like the mall is totally like, and when I think of it in the early 90s going to the mall, that's how the mall looked.
Looked like Stratford Square.
Mm-hmm.
Looked like Stratford Square to me. That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, totally. I totally love the throwback to that. But with that, let's wrap it up. So basically we find that, Joyce and Hop are helped by Murray and Alexei to actually destroy the gate that is built. Alexei actually turns to a good guy before he passes and tells him the ways to destroy the gate. So Joyce and Hop play spy and go underground and actually try to get the gate destroyed. At the same time, the kids are battling the Mind Flayer and Billy, where 11 actually gets hurt and loses her powers.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of this, we have one of the greatest renditions of a never-ending story by Dustin and Susie, who everybody thought was fake and not real.
Any chance Gaten gets to sing on camera or in front of people, he will take it. So he was like, sing never-ending story. That kid loves to sing.
Yeah. the kid's such a great kid. He has a prank show too, which I thought was pretty funny. One of the couple episodes I watched. But Billy ends up being released of the mind flare and seeing what he's doing and tries to rescue Eleven, and Max ends up perishing. And then we have the possible death of Hop with the great, and the whole thing that I really loved throughout this whole season that is the development of the character of Steve.
Mm-hmm.
I told you I hate Steve in season 1. I thought he could have died by the Demogorgon,
and I kept my mouth shut. I was like, zip. I felt the same way, and then
Steve is like my favorite character. Like the way the arc of him redeeming himself, him actually growing a relationship with Dustin that's like his best bud now. He looks up to him as mentor, and just the fact, you see it even in season 4 how he looks at, like, he's kind of like a father figure to the kids or an older brother, where he feels that's the responsibility to keep them safe. And just his character development, I thought his arc is beautifully done. That's why he's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, he's my favorite character. I mean, you can see my name on the show today, Steve Harrington Stan, because his character went from being a total douche canoe to, who I thought he was going to be like the horror film boyfriend. And then, I mean, the first time you see him in this season, when Dustin comes to visit him at the
Scoops Ahoy.
Scoops Ahoy, and they have their stupid nerd handshake. And I'm like, because again, at the end of season 1, he becomes the babysitter, and then he builds this bond with all of them. And he's like the grownest kid, I guess you would call it. And when he sees Dustin and then they do a little handshake, I mean, how do you not love Steve? Like, how can, at this point, if you've watched this show for 4 seasons, how can you not look at Steve and go, what? I mean, a near perfectly written character that initially you judged a book by its cover, and a character can change and people can change. He went from he knows he was a douche canoe, and now he's seeing what happens when you become a good person. It's not that easy to get all the girls at first. It's not that easy to do all this. It's easy to do the wrong thing. It's harder to do the right thing. And so he's starting to find that lesson. And when he goes through that lesson and that character paradigm shift, it's just fun to watch. And in this season, he's textbooks. He finally wins a fight, for God's sakes. I mean, it's insane. Of course, Dustin lets him know. Yeah, I finally want to fight. When he finally knocks out the guy at the control deck and down in the lab facility. But that's what makes Steve such a great character. He's got great hair, obviously, too. But
the Farrah Fawcett hairspray.
Lots of what were they using? Aquanet. I believe Aquanet was. But and the dude that plays him, Joe Keery. I don't know if you've seen some of those fake documentaries they did about the pandemic in like the year 2020 and 2021 or whatever. But he plays an Instagram influencer on that, as he's a fake character. It's hilarious. But I mean, that dude makes he again, the writing for these characters. I don't know how many times now in just a short time we've mentioned how well the character was written. How these guys have written these characters and captured, even though that's 30 years ago, 40 years ago, God, you've got these characters that you can still connect with, and of all ages and generations. And that's how it's a really well-written character, is if the audience feels a connection, good, bad, whatever. It's the point is to create emotion within your audience. And with Steve, especially, when you get into season 4, you get, it's like the Game of Thrones fear. Everybody starts getting worried towards the end of a series as it starts wrapping up. Who's going to die? Like, are you going to make it? You better not kill so-and-so. Game of Thrones, you better leave Jon Snow alone the second time. And so you got like these types of characters that you've grown up with. I mean, in a sense, we've grown with Steve. We've grown with Dustin. We've grown with even Billy. We grow with Max into season 4. And, Max was not, I didn't really like Max as a character in season 2. 2, she was fine. 3, this season, she kind of annoyed me because she was kind of like a homewrecker a little bit with Eleven and her relationship. But, it's so well written that these characters can be rounded, and so many of them in an ensemble cast, which is very difficult to do. I mean, Eleven obviously is a great character too, but I feel like the characters around her, the ones that don't have powers, you have to write extra well for them to have that draw to your audience, because Elle has superpowers. I mean, that's easy. Like, she's got one thing about everybody else. So how can we make Steve attractive to everybody, even good people and bad people? How can we make, because Steve's the good looking guy, how can we make dorks like Steve? Well, turn Steve into a dork. How can we make, how can we get, I don't know, Dustin to be liked? Well, he goes to summer camp. He's a perfect kid to fall in love with, like a brilliant MIT bound fellow nerd, that he found his soulmate, but you wouldn't know her because I met her at camp. Those things, playing all that kind of fun stuff. So so well written. It makes it.
I agree with you. But like we were talking when we talked off camera, like I just think there's two different, two things that I kind of don't like about the character development. And one of them was with Mike. Mike was likable in the first season, and I think the way they kind of write him going forward, he becomes very unlikable. He kind of becomes an ass. And this season, I can give him a pass, I guess, because he's still a teenager, and him and 11 just want to make out. That's the big thing, But like his character development makes him kind of unlikable. The second season, he was a complete jerk towards Max the whole season because he didn't want her to replace Elle. We understand that, but even towards the end, he was a jerk when Elle came back. So his character, like he's kind of like a jerk to his friends, and we find out in season 4 he's a jerk there too. And this season, same thing. Him and Lucas, Lucas is occupied with girls, but they're kind of jerks towards Will. So I want to see how they're going to do in season 5, how they develop his story arc. But he became kind of really unlikable. And the only other issue I have with the writing is the writers write a lot of heartbreak in terms of relationships in this series. Steve and Nancy. Steve tells her he loves her. Nancy ends up leaving him for Jonathan. Steve goes to then Robin, who Robin comes out as she likes girls, a lesbian, I'm assuming. Don't quote me on that, but she likes women. She comes out saying she likes girls, and that's another heartbreak. He basically pours his heart out to her, telling her he likes her, and she's the girl for him, and she tells him that, and he accepts it. They're best friends, But that's another heartbreak. And then Dustin and Lucas and Max. Dustin loves Max, and then they just take him away and let Lucas go with Max. So it's kind of like continuous heartbreak.
And of course, poor Joyce having to watch her boyfriend have his chest eaten out of him in front of her with her own eyes while they're trying to escape when he sacrifices his life for her. And Hopper's heartbreak is Hopper being alone. Hopper forcing himself to be alone is the heartbreak for Hopper. So there's like that loneliness there too, where he's doing like what superheroes some have to do, where they have to like live a life of solitude to protect those that they love and never get to be the person who's in love. Like Doctor Strange with what's her name in the most recent Doctor Strange, even like he's got to watch her get married. And he goes to her wedding because he made the commitment to be the hero. And sometimes you've got to sacrifice the things you love most to protect them. And that's Hopper. So there's so much different types of heartbreak as well. And then of course, obviously the physical one of just watching a demon dog eat your boyfriend's heart, literally heart. But
I just like hopefully we see a relationship work out where somebody likes somebody and it kind of works out, because it's kind of like, oh yeah, we're gonna now, like I gotten used to it. So in this season, I'm like, when you could tell he likes Robin, I'm like, there's gonna be something where she doesn't like him or something, like, because they were perfect for each other, like, and it just turned out to heartbreak for him. So I just want to see how they kind of, I guess, tie up all the loose ends. But I was telling Jen this, like, man, they really write like love. If you're in love with a character on here, like, there's a chance that it's not gonna end up with them. And they're doing it again with Nancy and Jonathan. Like, so it's the same thing. It's just but besides that, every other character is beautifully written. Even the small one, Susie was a great little addition. She plays a little role in the next one. Just every side characters, like Murray, when we get to season 4, it's Murray's time to shine. Murray starts having a lot more ambiance to the cast. But I really thought this season, like, besides Billy, I think this was like the season of Steve's development character. I really loved the way his arc is.
Absolutely, he is that guy, and you can't also filter out the growing character development of Noah, who of the group of the kids is the most awkward. He's kind of, he was kind of the most. Will. Sorry, I just call him by his
real name.
He's been like in every single freaking thing on social media. Like, he's getting mad. Like, he's got Doja Cat mad at him. He's everywhere I look. That Noah's like somewhere. Noah Schnapp. So Will Byers, sorry, but Will's character has something else growing inside of him, and it's not a demon. And that's another character development that we're seeing that I think we all know. I think we're all kind of see it at this point, but it starts in season 1 where he's the kid that's taken. He's just the nice, sweet kid that, and then the next season he's, awkward. He's still awkward. He's the kid that probably got picked on a little bit more. And then, season 3, the kids are evolving and they're growing into their little, they're growing into young adults, and, they're having girlfriends, or they're playing sports or whatever the heck it is they're doing. And then this season it's girlfriends. But here's Will. And so Will's development in this is so quietly subtle. And I don't know if I don't personally feel like the I don't know if the intent with the Duffer Brothers was to make him this way the whole time, or if they started seeing that how could this development does seem to be relevant in the 80s, because it's something that in the 80s was, again, still something you kind of kept inward, and Will has had a lot of inward, he's had inner demons literally. And so having that whole character development, and in season 4 it develops a little more, and I from what I've been reading, it sounds like season 5 is really going to flesh out the seeds that they've been planting with this season. And I mean, again, the Noah Schrapp kid, he basically said that Will is gay and that Will loves Mike. And so that's a really difficult thing to adjust. But when you look at these seasons in context now, because he said that, you can see how everything that Will does kind of surrounds around Mike, and what Mike does surrounds around, always is revolves around Elle, and Elle is what revolves around her family, which includes Will. So it's like a weird circle that keeps everybody kind of together. But I'm really looking forward to watching Will's character and how in the 80s they're going to have him come out, I guess you could say. I mean, he had a really powerful scene in season 4, but I mean, it's all a foregone conclusion. But in this season too, he struggles with it. He tears down their little hut, whatever, the little house, little treehouse or whatever, and he's broken because he's alone. He's still wearing his wizard outfit, coming down to play Dungeons and Dragons, and sooner or later, the kids' games that you played, as you grow into young adults, we do kind of grow out of certain things. And it doesn't mean you're not a Dungeons and Dragons fans, but it means, hey, I want to go play basketball, or I want to go to the mall and talk to girls. I want to, I don't want to always just be playing this game. And some guys get stuck in that. Some kids get stuck in that mode, and it does become an awkward thing. And I think we're seeing so many different types of stereotyped characters in the kids themselves that, Will's character is really developing that way. So I it's intriguing to me, but I do also, knowing now that what he said, Noah Schrapp said, I think that it makes it a little more interesting to watch Will now as he's developing his strength and comfort in knowing who he is, which is not easy for a kid that age, or an actor in general.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, the seeds are planted, but I think the Duffer Brothers actually, gave us the glimpse of it with the character of Robin. Robin even says herself, like, she likes a girl that had a crush on Steve, and she basically tells him, what if she finds out, like, what if she doesn't feel the same way? Do you know what everybody in the town would think about me, about the way I am? Like, and that just kind of like points to that, in the 80s, the AIDS scare was a big thing. Coming out was very hard. It's still difficult today, believe it or not, but it's a lot more accepted than it was back then. And these characters, the people sometimes got married that weren't straight, and they had to confide to the norms. You basically act like they're normal, and they struggle with themselves. And I do like the way they develop Will's character that way. We'll get more into it when we talk about season 4, but I do like the seeds they're laying. The Robin character, I think, is kind of like a precursor to Will going forward. And the one thing I have about Will that bothers me is Will and Jonathan both is they both need to go see a different barber, because that mole haircut ain't working, man.
God, he looks like a mushroom on his head. Like, it's a really bad mushroom. Yeah, but that's, what though? God, it's so bad to say, but in the late 80s, the awkward working kids, that was their freaking haircut because their mom cut their hair. And that's, I'm sure Winona Ryder cuts his hair. I'm sure Joyce is the barber for poor Will, and it shows. Whereas Steve obviously goes to a stylist, but the character, I do have a problem. One part, I have a legit problem though with Robin. How I do understand that she was on a truth serum, and so she was a little bit woozy. But how are you laying on your back with your feet up underneath the fucking toilet in a bathroom stall while you're spilling the beans of the most, inner, which that whole thing with her, at least Steve's sitting on this, he's sitting down, but his hands aren't touching the bathroom floor right next to the shitter. And here's Robin. And I don't know if you got a picture of it. There's a picture. I mean, she's literally laying on her back with her feet up on the stall. So she's literally got her hair and her head down on the bathroom floor, right underneath the bathroom toilet. basically. So like, I mean, there are things called sprinkles, man. And so it's a mall bathroom for me. And I understand how mall bathrooms really were. Those were not, and maybe it's a ladies' bathroom. I don't know we don't really know which bathroom they were in. Probably I would assume ladies. But
well, I mean, in all fairness, there's pictures of Steve. I mean, I remember Steve reaching over the toilet seat with his arm. So I mean, and they also just threw up in that scene. So I mean, I'm pretty sure that at that time they didn't care. Three Stooges haircut, totally Three Stooges haircut. But yeah, it's it's really think about it. Yeah, it's pretty disgusting.
Guys, just so if you weren't alive, if you're a younger person, I promise the 80s had just as much nasty ass germs as we have today. So if you go into a mall or a casino or a restaurant and you go in their bathrooms, that's the bathroom floor that is in a mall. Probably worse because there's a lot of traffic because malls were loaded, packed with people, and people stayed there for like hours on end. I mean, it was a hangout for real. So yeah, they were. I was like, that's
yeah. And this is a movie. I think it's the movie theater bathroom too, which is even worse because people are after you go see a movie, the first thing you do is you go use the bathroom. So I don't know. I love the fact you point that part out about them being, but yeah. But with that, Fitz, I think we can wrap this one up. Put a bow on this. We're almost close to the hour mark. So next week, are you down for doing season 4?
Yeah, I'll be around.
Cool. So next week, check us out for reviewing things. Check out the Tainted Glove website at taintedglove.com. You got some blogs there from the Fidds, myself, Swole, and Pete. We got all our podcasts there and all of our tomfoolery. It's going to go there. Check out the Tainted Glove every other week on Mondays on this YouTube channel and also on everywhere you can find podcasts. And check out the Yumper and Swole podcast. Same place every other week, opposite of the Tainted Glove. And everywhere you can find podcasts. Fidds, you got anything closing remarks?
Ash, thanks for having me on. Always love talking shows, movies, and always a blast talking with you because you and I mean, this basically just eliminates the amount of texts that we're sending each other anyway. So this is it's always great to sit here and talk and rest in peace, Alexi. Rest in peace. Rest Alexi. I think we need to actually. I wish we could have like a Hunger Games tribute where they fire like it's just Alexi's like Hemdall's son's picture glowing in the sky. And firing off fireworks for all those that have passed, like when someone dies in the Hunger Games. But sorry, Alexi, I miss you already. Drink a Slurpee in heaven.
And with that, have a good one, everyone.